of questions regarding quartz crystals.
Okay, shoot.
Okay, regarding the quartz crystals, natural and man-made, we discussed impurities and perfect lattice structures, etc. Is it possible in this world to impress information on quartz crystals? And if so, how would that be accomplished? Further, can it be done on natural quartz, or does it have to be a perfect crystal? I know it is accomplished by, say, using sound or light to modulate or impress information. But how exactly?
You can do it. And it actually even happens on any quartz, natural or not. You give it an imprint, a frequency. That's why holding crystals for meditation works, and for healing and connecting and all that. The problem is that in this case, they cannot be natural, because they need to be very uniform in every way. They must hold the same frequency and give off the same piezoelectric print or spark, vibrate at the same rate. If they were natural, then you could not make them equal. And if they would be natural, then you would have to carve them, not replicate them. Simply not effective.
Understood. Thank you. Do they have to be a specific shape?
Yes, as we discussed yesterday. They must be about the same size of a grain of beach sand and be perfectly formed like this.
I understand they have their own specific resonance, but just exactly how would I go about impressing information on the crystal? Then how would I retrieve it?
The resonance or frequency is imposed on the crystal using gravity and a dominant specific frequency that the computer will assign to them based on the energetic equations observed in base 12 vortex mathematics. So they are immersed in a high energy electromagnetic field with a very specific frequency that is AI controlled. That's how each one gets its assigned frequency and quartz oscillation. Then they particle pair with their opposites in the quantum, creating a spark. As there are millions of them, you get millions of controlled sparks. The computer controls the sparks, modifying the frequency of each field that control the 12-layer toroid that is the core. Using two methods. 1. Frequency imposition transition to a lesser precise one from the one in the quantum, therefore reducing the pairing effect and with it the power of the spark. 2. Expanding and contracting the toroids. As they move together, they increase power, and as they expand or get further from one another, the gap is bigger and reduces the energy shared between the layers.
Forgive me, little sister, but are we discussing free energy reactors or crystal information storage? Storage units like a hard drive in a computer? I am speaking of the latter, just making sure.
Okay, I was still in reactors, but the principle is exactly the same. You impose a frequency oscillation on a crystal using high-energy magnetic fields of specific frequency.
So, modulated, essentially.
Yes, in both cases.
Yes, but I was envisioning this. In my hand, I have a piece of perfect quartz crystal, say a cube, perfectly or nearly cut and polished. Now, I want to take this piece and shove a lot of information into it, like storing the Library of Congress, etc. Now I further envision a perfect lattice structure, like in a diamond, all the atoms lined up in a cubic and perfect lattice structure. Now how would I inject the information into the crystal? Okay, you said by controlled high energy magnetic fields, and I understand that. I can do that. I develop a high energy magnetic field around the crystal. Now, I modulate that field and impress the information on it. Does that information now enter into the lattice structure and begin to vibrate at the frequencies or modulations? If so, then how would I go about retrieving that information in a useful form?
Good question. I had a similar question in mind, not that well expressed. From what I understand from the above description, it is done with the technology we don't possess. There are basically two ways of imprinting information on a crystal. You can either rearrange the molecular structure in it to contain a code, whatever code you want, but in this case you can use anything, and it does not need to be perfect quartz crystals. A piece of brick or road rubble works just the same.
Interesting. I choose the crystal because it's so uniform, molecularly or atomically.
The second, more elegant way is to assign a grid inside your crystal with whatever object mapping device you have connected to your main computer. Then you impose a frequency using high energy magnetism oscillations onto each part of the grid you assigned in your crystal. You can have minute grids inside your cubic crystal, so you can make each individual grid part vibrate at a specific rate. And I mean very small parts vibrating at different rates. There, pure quartz crystals can hold many interior vibrations, not only one per crystal. So you can either hold the frequency as long as you are imposing the energy on that mapped sector, where it will only hold the information code as long as the frequency is being imposed on it, RAM, or you can leave it as a hard drive vibrating eternally on its own until another frequency changes the oscillation rate and the information contained in it. The crystal must be placed at 0. That's why you need to cleanse it first. Then it will hold your frequency. So be careful what you imprint in it, as they can hold very subtle but influential oscillations and energy frequency. On your crystal, it resonates with your frequency, as it holds another that is or was yours, so it does influence you when you hold it in your hand, for example.
I am sure the human DNA can and has a code impressed on it, and I don't mean our genetic structure.
Why do you think it is crystalline?
Not necessarily crystalline, little sister, but a code from a maker or an instruction, perhaps.
According to my science, it is perfectly and mathematically crystalline.
DNA? Yes. Whoa, never thought of it as a crystal.
And what does it even mean, crystalline? Crystalline means the molecular structure of an object. Okay, crystalline, nicely stacked.
Okay, then to my question, how do we retrieve the information we stored in the crystal?
Mentally?
Perhaps. but not practical.
As you impose it with high energy, you can read the frequency of oscillations with the use of sensors, like very precise interferometer readings, or reading the oscillations with a precision laser.
But that would mean scanning the crystal at an atomic level, trillions of atoms.
Depends on the size of the assigned sector containing the vibrations. If you can impose a frequency oscillation on a specific group of molecules within a crystal, you can read it the same way. You move the energy field to the sector until it equalizes the frequency.
So, essentially, little sister, storing and retrieving information on a crystalline substrate is well beyond human capacity at this time.
It is possible with human standards and hardware, but the problem is the size. Another problem is that large pieces of crystal tend not to oscillate as well as small groups of semi-isolated molecules within the structure of the crystal. So, the smaller, the better.
Okay, go back to the reactors. You said you have not finished about them yet.
Okay, question about the reactors. You have a sun in captivity, floating inside your ship in a spherical room. Now, what do you do with it? Wait, don't answer, let me think. See what floats out of it, since it's the portal's exit? Could be seen as that, but for what? To see what creatures come out. But yes, seriously though, Sun is the free energy reactor, right? Dale, what's your answer? Wording this in another way. You have a little but mighty sun in captivity. How can you extract its energy and put it to good use?
Not entirely sure, but you now have a sustaining source of energy.
Connected to the reactor on the ship? It is the reactor. It is the core. Right, yes. Then I don't know how to extract it.
Somehow you must transmute that energy to make the ship and crew vibrate at the exact frequency or harmonic that you would like to travel to.
That's the job of the engines. But the engines get their power from the reactor. That is the final product. But you still need to extract efficiently the electricity from the reactor to pump it into the frequency-controlled engines that in turn modify the frequency of the entire ship. Give us a clue. How do you translate a sun into electricity?
Electricity? Did not think you used that.
What else would we use? Well, the answer must have something to do with the quartz subject.
Plasma engines.
The little sun is magnetoelectric, so you can efficiently extract the power using an induction effect directly from the core. You don't even need to touch it. I mean the center of the core, the engine of the toroid. Second way is translating the heat into electricity, and this also serves as the cooling system.
Okay, so a superconductive coil around the sun would be the secondary of the inductor.
The container of the core, yes.
Okay, so let's look at this in a very simplified transformer circuit.
You translate heat into power, and electricity will be milked through induction, basically. In a starship, cold is not the problem. That's science fiction. It is heat. As you cannot radiate excessive heat into space. So all you can do is translate or transmute heat into electricity.
I was not sure that electricity was a universal constant.
It is not. But 5D here is not that much different from 3D. The only difference is the total average oscillations relative to one another of all the matter and energy present in it. So you basically translate everything from 3D to 5D in block, with few power changes due to reduced matter density. But that sun shouldn't be a problem since suns are not hot. No, but the sparks do produce heat. Sparks coming from that little trapped sun? Yes, sparks or arcs from one crystal to another. Am I making any sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, so the answer to your question above about how to extract energy from that sun trapped on board is induction. That's the answer. Let me Google induction. Induction and heat, basically. It is basically quite straightforward. Just about all the juice is used.
Induction is better illustrated or understood here, G, by how a transformer works.
Yes, or a coil.
Exactly, or as induction, heating of metals, etc. I use this, actually. I use both a lot.
Okay, but since you use heat for that and heat is a problem, then how do you protect yourselves from that heat? Sorry if you answered that already. I'm slow with these topics. We transform it into more electricity. We have advanced thermoelectric cells or plates, but we also use something old and efficient, steam. Do you ever experience fires on the ship? Do the reactors ever fail? And if so, what would be the cause? Fire is probably the worst enemy of a starship. There are fire stations every short distance in just about every passageway. I see, okay. So there is a risk. Very large one. Because of those reactors or anything? Because of anything. Do you use candles on board? Side question. No, not a good idea inside an oxygen-rich pressured atmosphere. I see. Last question. Do the reactors ever fail? And if so, what would be the cause? Yes, the harmonics that control the reactor flow can get offset, creating a drop in the energy dynamics that can shut off the reactor. Or there can be a failure in the very complicated gravity control mechanisms that sustain the toroid. And what would be the result? In these cases, the reactor would simply turn off, with all the little crystals falling to the ground harmlessly. Crystals falling to the ground? Yes, if the gravity cancellation or manipulation system fails, leaving the gravity flow to be the dominant one of the ship's artificial gravity, so the crystals would fall to the floor.
Millions and millions of them, like grains of sand.
Or, depending on the nature of the failure, they may lose cohesion, and the toroid will dissipate, leaving them all floating around in 0G uselessly. But this is very rare, and hardly ever happens, if ever.
If all the crystal Merkabas are encoded, then reapplying the correct gravity field and flow would restore them.
Yes, but you must recollect them again and place them or introduce them into the gravity-induced 12-layered toroid from the core. How do you recollect them? It is a mess. However you can. That's a task for the Cinderella. Something like that. I must go. I've been called to dinner.
Okay, little sister, thank you very much for your time and clarifications. Please have a good dinner and a great evening.
Thank you both for hearing me out. I hope I made sense.